Which Republican would be strongest in the 2024 presidential election? Today on Political Axis, we're going to do a tier ranking and go through all of these Republican candidates. I did one the other day for the Democrats. This one is for the Republicans. There's a lot of different tier rankings that have a whole variety of candidates. I didn't want to do one that had 40 or 50 candidates. I don't think that's all that enticing. And I didn't want to do one with only the top 4 or 5 candidates. So I'm going to do this one here. It's got a lot of the main ones. There's not too many and there's not too few. Now I've got tiers A, B, C, D, and F. I don't do an S tier. I do A tier. That's the best tier, most likely to win, including the primary as well as the general election. So some of these candidates might not make it through a primary, but they would do better in a general. So we're going to try to consider all of those factors. And this is just the candidate on their own. We're not factoring in national environment. We're not factoring in running mates. So let's get started here. First person here is Donald Trump. Now this is interesting. He's already won for president, very narrowly lost the second time, got a lot of baggage, that is for sure. So in a primary, he is definitely in the top 2, and he's arguably the favorite. In a general election, he would be a little bit weaker. I think people are just burnt out from Donald Trump. They've got that Trump fatigue. They view it as kind of a circus. A lot of Republicans, they've left the party. I don't know how many of them are going to come back at this point, now that it will even have been 4 years past 2020. The media would be heavily against him. Corporations would be heavily against him. You'd have people like Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Liz Cheney. They would all come out and say, never vote for this guy. They would try to sabotage it by running third party. So Trump would have a very uphill climb. But then again, I've counted him out before, and he's proven to be resilient. So you could make a case in a primary, he would be A tier. In a general election, it's a wild card. It's really hard to say if there's a lot of hidden Trump vote out there that's left that would really be enthusiastic about coming out for him and only him. That is unknown. But Trump still does seem to have the energy. We're not sure what his health would be like, but at this point he seems like he'd be able to run a campaign again. I'm going to put him in the C tier. The primary is A. The general is going to be lower. So I'm going to just settle on a C. Trump is definitely a hard candidate to rate at this point. Let's move on to Greg Abbott, governor of Texas. In a primary, I don't think he would be all that strong at all. In a general, he'd probably be a little bit stronger. I don't think Abbott would be really much of a winner. But he's from Texas. He would certainly win Texas. That's a semi-critical state at this point. I'll put him in a low C tier. You could maybe put him at D, but he's not the worst candidate. Next, Marco Rubio. In a primary, he already ran before. He really didn't do a whole lot. He won Minnesota. That's rather notable. I do think in a general, he'd probably be stronger. He's pretty establishment. In a primary, he wouldn't be too bad either. It's a tough call. I'm going to put him in C because I don't think he would really get close in a primary at this point. With Trump in it, he's not going to get close. Next, Liz Cheney. She would never get through a primary in a million years. And in a general, she wouldn't do anything either. Liz Cheney has a very narrow slice of the electorate that she appeals to. Next, we have Asa Hutchinson. He is the governor, or the outgoing governor, of Arkansas. I really don't see him doing anything at all. He wasn't really all that friendly to Trump, and I don't think he would do anything in a Republican primary, and in a general election, I think he would lose to most candidates. I'm putting him in the F also. Maybe bump him up to D, but I'm putting him in F. Now, Chris Christie. For me, I always thought Chris Christie was not that bad of a candidate because I think he's kind of a Trump light, even though he's establishment. I thought without Trump, he would have done well in that Republican primary in 2016. And I know his popularity as governor of New Jersey, it crashed hard in his last year or two. I understand that, but he's been out of office a little while now. I don't know what his appeal would be in a Republican primary. I think it's kind of borderline C and B again. And in a general, I don't think he'd be too weak. Some of you might disagree and say, no, this guy is totally unelectable. I'm not that down on Chris Christie. I think he'd be stronger than a mediocre candidate. Next, Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia. In a Republican primary, he would do a little bit, but not a whole lot. He got on Trump's bad side, of course, but he's not the worst candidate. In a general election, I don't think he would have a lot of appeal, though. Ron DeSantis, he's going to go in the A tier. I think he has a very strong chance to win a primary, but with Trump in it, it would be a horse race. Without Trump, it would be DeSantis all the way. In a general election, also, at this point in time, DeSantis would have a strong chance to win. Next, this one I actually had to look up. I think that is Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami. I'm not familiar with him at all. I don't know why he's really on here. Maybe he's talked about as some kind of up-and-comer. But I know he didn't even vote for DeSantis the first time. In 2022, he did vote for him. So I'm going to put him in F because I think his status and his profile is just way too low. Next, we've got Larry Elder. He ran in the California recall to oust Governor Newsom. He started off kind of strong, but he didn't really get anything done. I think he's another case of the media only being able to cast him in a negative light and not focus on anything positive about him. So I do think that is unfair. He would do better in a Republican primary, that's for sure. I'll put him in D. In a general, I probably don't think he would end up doing much. Next is Larry Hogan, who was the governor of Maryland, two-term governor. It's impressive for a Republican to win there, but he's viewed as a rhino. He's never going to win in a Republican primary, not at all. In a general election, though, he would go up a couple of tiers. He would be one of those moderates, might do okay in the suburbs, win over some independents, but I still don't think he would really win in a general election. I think if he was going up against a Democrat like Joe Biden, I think most of those people would just say they'd rather vote for Joe Biden than somebody a step or two under Joe Biden. Next, Mike Pence. We all know what happened with Pence. He's falling out with Trump. I think in a primary, he'd be able to do a little bit, but I think too many people are against him. And in a general, he'd be a little bit stronger, but still, I don't think it's time for Mike Pence. I think he would have been his strongest running in probably the 80s or 90s, maybe even in the early 2000s. He's that kind of a Republican, and he kind of harkens back to the family values era, but he is very establishment, and I don't think he would do much. Next, Mike Pompeo. I really don't think a lot of people even know who Pompeo is. I don't think he would do anything in a Republican primary. Don't think he would do much in a general. Maybe I'm underestimating Pompeo, but I'm putting him in F tier. Next, Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is establishment. She's sort of like one of these candidates that we're told she's the next thing and we should get behind her. So my own personal feelings aside, I don't think she can do much in a primary. That's the issue. She's not going to beat Trump or DeSantis. If those two were out of it, then all of a sudden Nikki Haley becomes in the conversation. So due to those two being in it, I'm going to put her in the C tier. But in a general, she'd probably be a little bit stronger, even though a lot of Trump Republicans would stay home for her. Next, we've got Ted Cruz. He's run before. He is quite unlikable. I'll put him in D. And next, we've got Glenn Youngkin. If Glenn Youngkin jumped into the race, which I don't think he's going to do, at this point, he'd probably be pretty strong. He's the governor of Virginia. He's only been in there a year. His popularity could crash. And I'm going to put Glenn Youngkin in the B tier. Without DeSantis and Trump and Glenn Youngkin jumping in, I think Youngkin would probably be one of the front runners. So those are my tiers, and not too many in the upper tiers. And I understand Trump is probably the favorite to win in the primary, but considering the general, I had to move him down to the C tier. And the rest of these people, a lot of it is up in the air. There's not a deep bench for the Republicans. I think DeSantis is their best bet to do well in a primary and in a general, but he did just win re-election as governor of Florida. Might not be a great idea to start campaigning for higher office less than a year into your second term. And we'll see what happens with Glenn Youngkin. He's got some time left. Maybe he runs for Senate. Probably a little bit too early for Youngkin. We got to see what his track record ends up being. And those are the tiers I came up with. You don't have to agree on all of them. It's all about having a respectable disagreement here or there. But let me know in the comments. Do you mostly agree with these tiers? Which ones would you change? Especially with the most notable people up, Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. Let me know down below. And on your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.